Hey everybody, Eric Wade here, and this is the asynchronous version of gamification and game-based learning PD that I did last Tuesday. So basically, here's how this is going to work. We're going to talk about what gamification is and what game-based learning is. If you were to Google either one of these things, they tend to get mixed up quite a bit. The general consensus amongst people who game and who use gaming in education have kind of separated the two out into gamification and game-based learning, and the definitions of those two are very, very different, as we'll see in a minute. But if you Googled gamification, you would find folks who discuss game-based learning and vice versa. So for the purposes of what we're going to be doing, I'm going to keep them separate. I honestly feel like they're two very separate things, as you'll see in a minute. So this is kind of the philosophy that I subscribe to. So this is the kind of what we're going to talk about. Then we're going to look at what they look like in a classroom, or what they could look like in a classroom, and then kind of a framework for how to teach with games, how to put games into your classroom, and then look at our list of resources that I've procured for all of you to kind of peruse at your leisure, to kind of get you started. So I'd like to start with this Ralph Koster quote. Games are teachers, right? Using a game is a fantastic way to teach. Students are having fun. And since we're coming at this from the perspective of student engagement, fun is a fantastic way for students to learn. They most of the time don't even realize they're doing it. So it's just another word for learning. And I would agree with that 100%. So let's start with what gamification is. So gamification is using the aspects of a game design outside of a game. So that means that there might be competition among students, but it doesn't mean you're actually playing any games. It doesn't mean you're making any games. It's taking your existing curriculum, your existing your existing classroom, and making it game-like. So perhaps it is students walk in there rather than, this is the lesson you're going to learn today. Here's your mission. Here's the quest is the unit, and your boss at the end that you're fighting is the assessment. And then you set everything up as it would if you were playing a game. You could earn coins for completing levels. You can have little mini battles with mini bosses as formative assessments. But the idea is that you're gamifying the class, meaning that you're turning your classroom into a game itself. So it's the idea, like it says on the slide, it's game design in a non-game setting. Whereas game-based learning is very, very different. Game-based learning is more along the lines of what people think about when they think of gamification. This is using games to learn, whether it be as an introduction to kind of an opportunity for students to explore a new concept, or practicing a skill or a concept, or designing a game as part of an assessment. This is game-based learning. And this is what most people, when they hear gamification, this is what they think. But there are very, very different things. Gamification has badges and leaderboards, point systems, right? Those things are used to motivate and engage students, whereas game-based learning is using educational board games to teach with. You're using Jeopardy as a review, using Kahoot as an assessment. And one of my favorites, and I use this for a very long time in my classroom, is using Minecraft, for instance, to explore chemistry, or to build roller coasters or Rube Goldberg machines or something like that as part of an assessment. So they are very, very different from each other. We're going to talk about them separate, but kind of they cross in terms of how you can plan. But before we do any of that, kind of thinking about how you put these in your classroom, let's talk about what they could actually look like. So for gamification, here are some ideas that you could do. You could develop a leaderboard. So it could be a digital one. It could be a physical, literal like chart up on a wall, and students track their progress. Now, there's a bit of a FERPA issue here. You wouldn't want to put kids' names on there so that other kids see how they're progressing through things. That does get a little dicey. But perhaps it is, you don't put the names on there. You put a number or something. And then if they share their number, that's on them. And this teacher would update the leaderboard after students have left. They know their number, and they know who they are. The little friendly competition sometimes is really great for kids as a motivator. Similar with a progression chart, that you have, perhaps a chart, a physical chart or a digital chart of some sort that students move up as they progress through their learning goals, whether that be a unit, or maybe it's just one lesson that has multiple parts to it in one day. Students move their way through that, and you have that chart so that everybody can see how you're doing. Or you can individualize it. You can make progression charts that are purely individualized for individual students, and kind of mesh that, work that into a slides presentation or something like that, so they can see their progress as they travel through whatever it is that they're doing. Then there's badges. Badges don't have to be like physical badges. They can absolutely be, like a circle badge that says completed level 2. But it could also be like, like Mario collecting coins or collecting XP points or something along those lines. It doesn't have to be like a physical badge. It can be representative of a game of whatever you want it to be, and have your students be a part of that. They may all decide they want to have coins, or they all may decide they want to have a physical, like a piece of paper that's a circle or a square that says, completed level 2. It's really up to you to decide how you want to use that, how you could use that badging process. The next one is quest submissions. So instead of coming in every day and here are your learning targets, here's your mission for the day. Your unit plan is a quest, and you integrate. You may have game-based learning integrated into your gamification classroom. Like that's fine. That's great. And maybe your quest has to do with a one piece of, your quest is a whole unit, and in the unit it's broken up into missions, and even inside of those missions there are little missions that you have to be able to complete. And after you complete a mission, you get a badge. After you complete the quest, then you get all your badges come together, or you take all of the badges that you've earned, and that's how you earn your fight with the boss at the end, which would be the summative assessment, to show that you're ready for that assessment, and you can work your pace. Students can work at their own paces. And then the last one is feedback. One of the things about video games is that you're constantly receiving feedback. If you're struggling at a point, then and one thing isn't working, then you got to try something else. Think of any game you've ever played. You're immediately getting feedback as to how you're progressing through that game. This is a fantastic opportunity to do the same thing, to give students feedback on how they're progressing through their quest, through their missions, all the time, right? Whether it's written feedback, verbal feedback, whatever it might be, whatever works for you. But that way you're constantly giving students an update on how they're doing as they progress through their gamified projects, their gamified quests, or their missions, or however you want to describe it. With game-based learning, you have a couple of different choices. And again, like I said before, these things can mesh together. It's not like you have to do one or the other. They flow really well together. So for game-based learning, you can do student-created games where students make a game, a physical game. If that's what works for you, get out the cardboard and the glue and the paints, and do it that way if that's what works best for your classroom. A digital game, you can make a digital game in Google Slides or Keynote or PowerPoint. Relatively easy. There's online tutorials on how to do it, or email me and I'll help you figure it out. But that's one way to do game-based learning, is having students create these games. You could do a quiz type game like Kahoot or Jeopardy or Quizlet Live, any of those that are designed for checking previous learning, or practicing, or an assessment. You can give a Kahoot to individual kids and have them fill out the Kahoot on their own, and you can see their score as is formative or even as a summative if you wanted to. There's exploration, right? You can give a game to a student as to explore a concept before you get into the nitty-gritty of it. I've done this before. I use Legends of Learning for this. I give them a game that kind of introduces them to a topic, and they have to kind of learn. They have to read along and kind of understand what the topic is so that they can complete their game. And I've had mixed success with it. I've had some that have gone fantastic. I had one once upon a time that was about the organelles of a cell, and I thought it was amazing. I'm like, this is so cool. This is such a great game. The kids hated it. So you kind of we'll get to the idea of listening to students in a few minutes, but and getting feedback. But you know, using a game as exploration, using a game for students to kind of start getting an idea of what it is you're going to be doing is a great way to kind of put games into your classroom. You can use games to apply new concepts. Like I said, I use Minecraft in my classroom, and one of the assessment for the chemistry unit I do is you have to make a pig float away with a balloon, and you have to screen record the entire process, starting off at the atomic level, moving all the way to compounds and creating latex and helium and making the pig float off. So they're applying their learning to put this all together to make the pig fly. And it's also my assessment. That's what I use as the assessment at the very end of my chemistry units. Is you have to be able to do to make that pig fly and show me that you understand these ideas. But there are lots of ways to use games as assessments. There's lots of fantastic simulations, especially for science and math, that are really great ways for exploration, application, and assessment. And they can be game-based if you make them, if you kind of gamify them a little bit. They may start off as simulations, but if you use a little gamification, put a little competition into it, then it becomes more of a game-based learning rather than just a simulation. And last but not least, RTI. I mean, I think there's some really fantastic websites, which we'll get to in a few minutes, that kind of meet kids where they are in terms of what they need for RTI. And this can be a good way to engage them in a process that a lot of students tend to not enjoy as much on a regular basis. So let's look at this breakdown on how you can teach with games. So this is what I'm going to show is from a book called Power Up Your Classroom, which is at the end, and I'll show you the link. It's a fantastic, short, straight to the point book. It is, but it has a kind of a breakdown of how you can use game-based learning and gamification, how you can put it into your classroom. But we're going to start with this idea, a couple of things that I've learned doing this for quite a while. First one is start small. When I started doing games, gamifying my class and adding game-based learning to my class, I really didn't want to overwhelm myself. So I started really, really small, and I piloted my idea with one group of kids, right? Like there may be, like I was lucky. I had 4 classes a day that I would teach the same thing. So I could pick one class to do a little bit differently than the other 3 and just to pilot it and see how that works. If it doesn't work for you, then you could pilot with a small group of kids in a class or with 1 or 2 students in a class, depending on how you want to do. But I always found it very, very helpful to pilot something that I'm going to try just to see and get that feedback because students are the ones that we're trying to motivate here, right? We're trying to engage them. So their feedback is super important to help us understand what it is exactly that they're looking for an engagement in terms of games. But also help. I was not a Minecraft player, for instance. That was not something that came around when I was a kid. I was a Nintendo Entertainment System kid with with Mario and the original Zelda. Minecraft is not something that I was into. So I relied heavily on my students to help me understand how to use that. I had the ideas on how I wanted to use it, but I didn't have the practical use of Minecraft to be able to understand how I could put that in play. So I relied on my students. I asked them for help, and that was really weird at first. But it really, as I was just talking to somebody today about how asking my students for help on this built a stronger relationship between me and my students. They saw me not just as a teacher and a facilitator, but also as someone who's not perfect, who doesn't know everything, who needs help from time to time, and their skill set is unique and much different than ours. And I say ours, I mean general teaching. So let's look at this framework. If you're a Wiggins-McTeague person and you like the idea of working backward design, then start with 4 and work your way to 1. But this isn't meant to necessarily be like a continuum necessarily either. It really is just a way to kind of think about how you can put this into your classroom. So this works for game-based learning and for gamification. So the first one, the objective is what is exactly that you're trying to do? What's your standard, right? We want to start with those all the time anyway. Then when you start talking about your design, are you looking for a game-based learning? Are you looking for a game to specifically work in the content or the skill set that you're trying to have students, or that you're working with students on? Or is it that you may not be able to find a game that works really well for what you're doing? Because there are games for a lot of things, but there are some that are pretty okay, and there are some that are terrible, and there are some that are fantastic. So if you start off with this idea of game-based learning and you're like, okay, I really want to use a game here to kind of engage my students, and you do a little research and you can't find one, well, then that's not going to work. But you could still gamify what it was that you were doing. You could use gamification instead of game-based learning in your class to motivate students to get to kind of build that engagement. So, and if you find both, then that's fantastic. Use them both. But you want to start off with that design ideas. How exactly do you want this to look? What do you want this to look like? And then is the educational technology going to be a part of it? There's no rule that says that everything has to be technology based because you're using game-based learning or gamification. If the game of Risk is going to work for you, then play the game Risk. If you're talking about thinking logically through a problem, like computational thinking or using steps in a process, there are lots and lots of just physical games that work really well for that. And perhaps that's your game-based learning. And there's no need to put educational technology in there. But if there is and you want to put it in, then that's fantastic. If not, fantastic. You could also do that as well as when the design piece of this is building games. So you can build physical games. Students build games all the time. It's a really fun way to kind of end a unit or build a summative, build an actual physical game. But there are lots of online game building tools. Scratch is a fantastic example of one that is free, and you can use it to build a game. If your students understand coding, or you want to get them into coding, building a game in Scratch isn't super challenging. You can absolutely do it. And then there are others that are a little more challenging to kind of work and cost money that you can use as well. So then once you've figured out that part, you got the design piece down. Next, you want to think about how you're going to use your challenge. And for this one, you can this is kind of fits in with either game-based learning or gamification. So if you're using a game-based learning, you'll have some different kinds of puzzles, different kinds of games that you can think about, but you can also use this idea for gamification. So for instance, maybe your game that you want students to play is a solving game. It's a logic puzzle or a trivia game, right? Or has a quest. You have like a learning quest. And you can find a game online that does that for you. If you can't, then you can use that idea for gamification as well. A learning quest can take place in a physical classroom as a game that you create. Same with logic puzzles and trivia. All of those things all fit into there. You could have it start off as a mystery. In science, we talk about these ideas, anchoring phenomena, which is like something big, a way to catch students' attention and to make them start thinking about whatever it is that we're going to learn. Works for everybody. Having some sort of mystery to explore, like this big idea of who done it. Why did that happen? How did that happen? How do I get there? That's a puzzle. That's a solve that you can do. It could be a build. You could do a construction of a physical or virtual world. Minecraft or Gamecraft, Classcraft, or any of those type of things are fantastic games to use that fit into the building model. But again, if you're not going to use game-based learning and you want to use physical, make physical worlds, like building things, again, that's not a problem. Like it works for you. You should totally do it. You can gamify that and make that into a challenge for students in some way. Then there could be a collect version of a game where you have to gather resources and hit a winning target, which again, if you can find a game that does that, that's great. And if it's your goals, awesome. Or you could gamify whatever it is that you're doing and have them gather resources in a way to hit a winning target of some sort. Then there's the control where students battle each other. Nitro type is one of my favorite typing applications because students race against each other. The faster they type, the faster their car moves. But if they're not accurate, their car doesn't go as quickly. They can earn points, they can earn skills, they can earn coins, they earn XP, they can buy new cars. They're battling other people online, but there's no chat function or anything like that. It's a fantastic online game-based way of practicing typing. We use it in middle school a lot. But you could also have a gamified version of that in your classroom, where you're having students battling each other with skill and strategy in a classroom that has to do with whatever the goals of the learning is. And the last one is more of a survival, the strategy puzzle that you either you survive or you die. Legends of Learning is a fantastic example of this online for game-based learning. You have to battle people, do math, do science, answer questions, and you get skills, and those correct answers gives you power, and power to beat your enemy. And if you don't do it well enough, then your character dies. You have to start over again. But you can do the same thing in gamification. No, I'm not advocating that anybody, there's no life or death in our classrooms. But the idea that once you run out of points or once you run out of coins, then you have to sit on the sideline, or you have to kind of sit back and watch while everybody else finishes until there's a winner. And then after you've got all this, so you've designed all this, you've got game-based learning, you've gamified everything. Think about your assessment. Is the assessment going to be part of the game? Or is the assessment the game itself, right? It could be any of those things. Is it at the end where you fight a big boss as part of the summative, or is it that the assessment is separate of the game and it's an application question that you're using to check and make sure the students understand? How are you going to measure the success? How are you going to give feedback? Of course, you should be giving feedback the entire time because it's gamified. And again, like I said earlier, feedback is a huge part of gaming. But how are you going to do that? Is it going to be verbal? Is it going to be typed? Are you going to do it or like physically type it? There are lots of really great tools that you can use. One of them is called Mote, where you can add your voice to to a Google Classroom assignment or something like that to give feedback to students. So how are you going to give the feedback as you travel through all of this? Not just on the assessment, but as it travels, as students are working their way through their objectives. And then the last one is, how are you going to have students showcase what they've done? And maybe it doesn't fit. Maybe it's not applicable here. But if you're going to have students build a game, wouldn't it be great for them to be able to showcase that out to the world in some way? Whatever it might be, whether it be a family game night or just posting on the web for other people to play at their leisure. So those are the 4 steps. And there's actually a 5th one, which is called next steps. And I kept it separate because this is a really important piece after it's all done. So you're all finished. You've done everything. Students are done. Everything is good. So the next steps, what went well? What didn't go so well, right? So if everything went perfect, that's amazing. Congratulations. It's super awesome. But chances are that's not going to happen. There are going to be parts along the way where it doesn't go well, where something didn't fit, something didn't work, your idea just fell flat. That happens. It's it is. It's we've all teaching that's a big part of teaching is what went well and what didn't go well. Reflecting on your teaching is a huge piece of education. So being prepared to say what really went well and what can I fix, what can I do differently in the future so that it meets the goals that I had or that it engages students a little bit more. Did students actually learn? Like, did they meet the goals that you had set out in the first place? That's obviously a very important piece of this. And then the last part is, were the students more engaged than normal with the content or less engaged? Because the goal here is to engage our students through games, whether it be game-based learning or gamification. So if they're not engaged, then there's no sense in recreating that exact setup. It might have been the group, right? Like we all have those groups of kids that just aren't engaged no matter what we do. But if there wasn't engagement and you've done it a couple times and you're still not seeing that engagement, then perhaps it's time to think about something a little different. Or maybe they were more engaged. I mean, it really depends. So that's, again, this is all about engagement. That's the idea here. So did it actually do what it was supposed to be? Yes, awesome. Use it again. If no, what do you go back to the second arrow there? What can you adjust in the future to increase that engagement? Now, I will say this. I'm going to go back here for a minute. This idea is fine. Like I said, it's not a linear process. It's more of a thinking idea. But if you get stuck, or if this isn't something you're interested in, and you just don't really know where to start, please email me, reach out. I will come and we can work together side by side on putting some games into your class. And then when we're done, we'll look at the next steps of that, and we'll see what we can go from, where we can go next. So here's my kind of final thoughts on all of this. This is a quote from the Power Up Your Classroom book that I was talking about earlier. So this idea that if we leverage the power of gameplay to empower teachers as designer of game-based learning experiences, then learners will experience deeper engagement, owners of their learning experience, and so that they become lifelong learners seeking opportunities for creative problem solving. And then the authors of the book, Lindsay Bloss and Kate Tolini. I really like that quote. I think it's fantastic and really speaks to the idea of how powerful games can be in a classroom. So that's the basic, that's the ideas of gamification and game-based learning. What I have down below here, and this is a slide deck you should all have access to. So there's a list of games that I've kind of gone through and found that I liked, I thought were good. Most of them are free or freemium, except for Minecraft. That's not free. That's $5 per student. But it works on everything. It works PC, Mac, Chromebook, iPad. It works. It's universal. But I really love it, so I put it on there. But there's all of these games are great. Humanities games are all free as well, or freemium. There's free versions, and then you can there might be some expanded piece of it that you use. They may ask you to pay for, but the free stuff is really well done. There's also in my school we call them allied arts, but the health and phys ed and art pieces of it. I have some links of some games that I found that I really like. There's some SEL stuff in here. There's NitroType for typing, Code.org. Duolingo is a game for learning foreign languages. Graphic design, there's some really one. This Current Type is kind of neat. It totally did not fit my personality at all. I was so frustrated by it. But kids that like graphic design might really enjoy that. I also have some really great books that I've found that I think are really good examples of how games and or games in general, whether it be gamification or game-based learning, can become part of your classroom. These are all hyperlinked to Amazon, so if you're interested and you would like to purchase them, I just hyperlink them to save you the time. And these are the three kind of big thinkers around gamification and game-based learning in education. These are their websites that you're welcome to kind of travel to and check out on your own time. And that's it. So if you're interested in learning more, then please get in touch with me. There's my email address. You can follow me on Twitter if you're interested in that. Like I said before, if you're interested in kind of putting games into your classroom and you need a little bit of help or someone to help you think through how you can do this, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I will be happy to find a time for us to talk and build off your ideas and see what we can do. Which is true of everything as well, because as I kind of like to think about my job right now with MLTI is that let me be your tech integrator, let me be your thought partner, let me help you to kind of think about ways to use technology in your class that you may not have thought of before. So if this is something you're interested in, please reach out to me and we'll find a time to connect. Thank you very much. Have a great day.